Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining CASW's webinar today. My name is Roshni Kurian, and I am the Education Coordinator here at the Canadian Association of Social Workers. Thank you all for joining us here today for today's session on the Youth Research Academy, a BC model for engaging care leavers in community-based research. Before we begin, I would first like to acknowledge that the CASW is situated on the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations have been stewards of Turtle Island since time immemorial. We also remember those who were forced to come here, particularly those brought here because of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We recognize our complicity in settler colonial violence, and we honor our commitments to truth and repairing relationships. We welcome you to take a moment to reflect on the territories that you are tuning in from and the many nations and peoples who have cared for this land. Please do let us know in the chat where you are tuning in from. Before passing the podium on to our presenters, I will quickly go through some housekeeping formalities. Today's event will be 1 hour, and towards the end, we will address questions from the audience. Each of the widgets on your screen are adjustable in size and movable so that you can arrange your screen to suit your preferences. Live closed captioning in French and English is now available on the platform under the Media Player widget. I encourage you all to type your questions in the Q&A at any time, and we will do our best to address them at the end of the presentation. The recording of this webinar will be available in 24 hours using the link that you signed up with, and a certificate of attendance will be emailed to you at the end of the presentation, or you can download it directly from this platform at the end of the webinar. And lastly, please be sure to fill out the survey that will appear at the end of the session. I will now pass the podium on to Dr. Varda Menfetter, a professor of applied human sciences at Concordia University and representative of CanTrack, the Canadian Research Network on Transitions to Adulthood from Care. Over to you, Varda.
Thank you, Roshni. Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to what is the second of a 5-webinar series that's being co-sponsored by CanTrack. CanTrack is the Canadian chapter of INTRAC, which is the International Network on Transitions to Adulthood from Care. It's an international consortium of researchers from around the world who are devoted to advocacy and research to facilitate transitions for young people who grow up in substitute care and then transition to adulthood at the end of their time. And so again, delighted to have you with us. I'm going to briefly just show you the upcoming webinars. I don't know, Annie, if you can help it. Okay, we already had the first webinar, which was an introduction to CanTrack and to the problem of youth transitions out of care in Canada. Today's webinar will feature a presentation on the Youth Research Academy in BC, as mentioned before. We have a third webinar coming up with Melanie Doucette on Finding Our Way Home, a collaborative photo voice project with young people who have aged out of care in Halifax. The fourth webinar will be conducted in French by Annie Dumont from Quebec on and I'm translating here, the challenges of agency for the young women who are in transition out of care. And then our final webinar will feature PhD student members of CanTrack. INTRAC has a special group for PhD students, and so we'll have 4 of our best and brightest from across the country presenting on the upcoming results of their dissertation. So I wish you a wonderful webinar, and I'm going to hand the floor over to our presenters for today, who will introduce themselves.
Thanks, Varda. My name is Annie Smith. I'm the Executive Director over at McCreary Centre Society, who are responsible for the Youth Research Academy. I've got the privilege today to be calling in from the Lehadley-Tenay territory, which is up in northern British Columbia. I'm going to ask my co-presenters to introduce themselves. Katie, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Thanks, Annie. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie, and I work with Annie at McCreary doing a lot of our youth engagement activities. I'm very grateful to be joining this webinar today. And also, I'm going to introduce we have a Youth Research Academy member joining us, which we're very grateful for. Leah is joining us and will be participating in the presentation as well. So just before we get started, I do want to just acknowledge that I am joining, and McCreary Center Society is privileged to be located on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We also acknowledge the ancestral and continuing connection to this land of the Métis Nation. So just in case you don't know about the McCreary Center Society, we are a community-based research organization based in Vancouver, British Columbia. And we are best known for our BC Adolescent Health Survey, which we call the BCAHS, which is a school-based population-level adolescent health survey that we've been doing every 5 years since 1992. We're also quite well known for our youth engagement work, which is what we're here to talk to you about today. So just a brief agenda for our time today. Our presentation is going to focus on our Youth Research Academy model, and we'll then share how the longitudinal study that they've been working on is being used by statutory and non-statutory agencies to help evaluate and adapt services for care leavers in BC. We'll also include a discussion of our latest youth group, the Young Indigenous Research Team, which has been formed by Indigenous graduates of our Youth Research Academy to conduct research projects specific to Indigenous youth. And then we'll wrap up with some recommendations for those who are looking to engage youth in care in community-based research, and hopefully give some really concrete suggestions for you all. So first of all, our Youth Research Academy. So building on learnings from previous projects, we developed the Youth Research Academy, or the YIRT as we call it, in 2016 with the aim of having a less project-driven and more sustained group of youth researchers involved in our work. The YIRT is a group of up to 8 young people between the ages of 16 and 27 with experience of the government care system in BC. So last year, we changed the age range from 16 to 24 to 16 to 27 to reflect the extension in age of supports that are being rolled out by the Ministry of Children and Family Development, which is the government ministry in our province that oversees youth and government care. So members of the YIRT are employed part-time for 10 months and are trained to conduct research projects of interest to young people with government care experience and the agencies that serve them. The amount of hours per week that each cohort has worked has varied over the years. So for example, during the most intense times of COVID, we ended up doing 2 virtual cohorts, and we reduced their hours to about 4 hours a week, as we all know that spending 4.5 hours of time on Zoom is unrealistic for anyone. And so we did a reduction in hours during the most intense times of COVID. But most cohorts average out at about 10 hours a week of work. So to date, there have been 9 cohorts, and the 9th one just started this year at the end of this past June, which Leah is a member of. Most groups have included Indigenous peer mentors, and we also have a YIRT alumni group that's been developed to sort of support continued involvement of youth researchers that are in projects of interest to them, as well as we hold regular social events for them. So the goals of the YIRT are to increase youth participation in research, to train young people in and from government care and community-based research skills, to assist the participants to develop transferable employment and life skills, and to offer community and government agencies opportunities to engage with trained youth researchers who can conduct youth-led research projects of interest to those agencies. And we also have an evaluation component, which will offer evidence of the success of this model of engaging and supporting youth. As I said, most cohorts have had 1 or 2 Indigenous peer mentors, and we made the decision to have Indigenous peer mentors because in BC, Indigenous young people are still overrepresented in the care system. And as we are primarily a non-Indigenous organization, we felt that having Indigenous youth as peer mentors would be able to provide our Indigenous participants with a point person to go to. It could provide them with someone who can act as a liaison between the participants and the staff if it's needed. It helps to involve someone who can set standards and model some of the skills that we're teaching, and also allows the peer mentors to support any of those youth that might be struggling in their time in the YRA. And it was also a way for us to really provide kind of a continued employment opportunity for the Indigenous graduates who might not have been ready to move on, which we have seen to be quite helpful for a few of our youth. So I just wanted to share a few examples of how youth-led research can impact policy and practice and how we've seen it happen with the YRA. So the first example here is a family finding boot camp model. So the Adoptive Families Association of BC, which is an organization that works to support families and youth within the adoption system, hired the YRA to do a feasibility study of implementing a boot camp model to help youth in care develop permanency and to assist them to develop those natural family-like relationships that they're often lacking. This model came out of the United States and was showing some promise, and so the AFABC wanted to see if it was going to be feasible and adaptable for use in BC. So the YRA conducted a literature review and an environmental scan, as well as they provided insight and recommendations from their own lived experience. Interviews were conducted with leaders of agencies in both the US and in Canada that had implemented this model or something similar to just further gather more evidence on whether this model was feasible. The YRA also was able to interview other BC youth and staff who would be expected to sort of implement this model if it were to go forward, to get their perspectives on whether they thought that would be doable. And based on their research, the YRA concluded that the bootcamp model should not be implemented in BC as it was unlikely to be successful. And we had some really good and insightful conversations about the nature of sort of those permanent family-like relationships and how to support youth to get them if that's something that they lack. So as a result of the report and its recommendations, the Adoptive Families Association decided against implementing that model in BC. Another example was a project that the YRA completed for the Representative of Children and Youth in BC, or RCY, which is an organization that advocates for youth. So for this project, they were asked to develop focus group questions and an online survey to capture the school experiences specifically of youth in government care. The YRA analyzed both the quantitative and the qualitative data and developed a report with key findings and recommendations. And so as a result of the findings in this report and project, further work came about and a graduation fund was developed for youth in the Lower Mainland of BC. And all BC school districts appointed a person to be responsible for youth in care in the school system. This report is actually available on the McCreary website. If you're interested, you can go check it out. Another project was around looking at risky alcohol use among underage girls. So this was a part of a project for the BC Ministry of Health. And the YRA, again, conducted a literature review and included a review of evidence-based programs that are looking to address problematic alcohol use among underage girls. And the review led to a local granting organization to fund projects to promote dialogue and about potentially harmful alcohol use across the province. And then interest in the findings from this particular project led to another contract from the BC Ministry of Health for the YRA to conduct a review looking at different risk and protective factors for psychoactive substance use among youth. So it led to further projects. And then finally, we had a project we called Beyond a Dream Catcher. So this was a project where Indigenous members of the YRA worked on a research project to identify promising substance use treatment practices with Indigenous young people who've been involved in the criminal justice system. The project canvassed the perspectives of justice-involved youth, including their thoughts on what was working well and suggestions on how the cultural needs of Indigenous youth can be best met within substance use treatment programs. So again, the members of the YRA were able to conduct a literature review they really helped to design sort of the whole project methodology. And then for this project, they were also able to co-facilitate and take notes during focus groups, which involves some travel around the province. They then analyzed the data and contributed to the final report and recommendations. And then something else that they did from this project, which was really cool, was we were talking about how to share the data back, and we ended up deciding that they created a snakes and ladders game, which you can see on the screen here. And so we actually had one of our Indigenous youth hand draw up the board to begin with, and they fit in all the different barriers that are experienced. And you'll see here the board is divided in half. So the first half, the bottom half of this board, is the barriers and supports that youth experience in trying to access treatment. And then the second half of the board are the barriers and challenges experienced and supports for youth once they're within treatment, because there was kind of a real divide within that project of like even accessing treatment in the first place and then staying in treatment. And as you can see, it's a really great visual way to share the data, and it's really hard to actually finish the game, which I think is a really clear picture of what youth experience trying to access substance use treatment. We did manage to play it with some service providers, and it sparked some really good discussion. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Leah, who is going to share about a study that the YIRT has been involved with, and who will share some of the as yet unpublished data from our upcoming annual report on this study. So take it away, Leah.
Thank you, Katie. Since 2019, the YIRT has been working on a longitudinal study of youth transitioning out of government care in BC. The age youth traditionally leave government care in BC is 19. The goal of the study is to understand the experiences of youth as they transition out of care and to identify how they can be better supported through this process. Youth aged 18 to 27 with any type of care experience can complete a first survey and then are invited to complete a follow-up survey every 6 months until they turn 27. Survey questions were developed with input from local statutory and non-statutory agencies and ask about youth's background, health, including mental health and substance use, experiences in care, and a range of other experiences. Just over 400 youth have joined the study to date, and each cohort of the YIRT produces a report of the findings annually. Each annual report is used by BC government, local not-for-profits, and others to see how policies and programs are working and where energy should be focused. For example, the Youth Futures Fund and Trust, a local collective impact, use the survey as one of its core impact evaluation measures. To date, around 4 in 10 participants were under the age of 19 when they first joined the study. Most participants identified as female, and about 4 in 10 identified as Indigenous. Among Indigenous youth, about 3/4 identify as First Nations, about 1/4 identify as Métis. We're going to share a few findings from the report the current cohort of the YIRT have produced, which is currently being laid out for release. Most of the following results being shared are from youth who have transitioned out of care, unless noted otherwise. The findings were generally similar between youth still in care and those who had transitioned out. Most youth had received services through MCFT, and about 2 in 10 had received services through a delegated Indigenous agency. The most common types of government care that youth had ever experienced were being in a foster home or on a youth agreement. Among youth who had transitioned out of care, almost 2/3 had accessed agreements with young adults or the new Strengthening Abilities and Journeys of Empowerment, or SAGE program. While youth are still in care, they are entitled to a care plan to help identify support needs and develop goals. Among youth still in care, 70% reported that they had a care plan, and 13% did not know if they had one. From the open-ended survey responses, participants have shared that while transition planning can seem daunting, can be extremely helpful, and it should start around the age of 14 or 15 and continue until the youth ages out. Among youth who had transitioned out of care, 40% reported that they did have a transition plan, along with 41% who did not. Youth mentioned that having a supportive adult can impact the feelings of preparedness for transition and ease the process. Youth also emphasized that it was helpful having a supportive adult teach you basic life skills such as paying bills or budgeting. Youth don't just need someone to support them before or during their transition, but also after their transition, including support with things such as being able to cook meals, budget properly, pay taxes, and find resources around the community. In the last year, there have been many exciting announcements about improved transition planning and transition support for youth in and from care in BC, including the introduction of dedicated transition workers and an extension of transition support up to age 27. This graph highlights the ways that having a transition plan can positively impact a youth's feeling of preparedness in many aspects of their future, including feeling more prepared to pursue their education, apply for needed benefits like AYA or income assistance, and to access healthcare. Youth are also more likely to understand their tenancy rights and responsibilities and to feel more prepared to live independently. The survey also asked questions about how satisfied youth are with their life, about what they're proud of, and about their goals for the next 6 months. Quarter of youth reported feeling good about themselves, and most youth could name something they were good at. Youth commonly shared that they were good at sports, art and music, cooking, and academics. They also shared interpersonal and social skills like being a good listener, making friends, and encouraging others. Just under half of youth who had transitioned out of care reported their physical health as good or excellent, and about 4 in 10 rated their spiritual health this way. About 3 in 10 reported positive emotional and mental health. Around 9 in 10 youth had an adult in their lives who cared about them, and about 2/3 had at least one adult they could talk to if they were having a really good or bad day. When youth had access to helpful and supportive adults while still in care, it seemed to have benefits 6 months later once they had transitioned out of care. For example, youth who had a helpful youth worker while they were still in care were more likely to feel prepared to live independently once they had transitioned out. Similarly, having adults to support with various tasks helped to reduce challenges and barriers youth faced. For example, youth who had an adult to help them with housing were more likely to report that their living situation met their needs and to feel safe where they were living. Youth were also given an opportunity to share their suggestions for how to better support youth in their transition out of care. Some of these suggestions included that supportive adults should be consistent, dependable, and support a youth for a longer time before and after their transition out of care. Other suggestions included more supports for mental health, life skills, and preparing for adulthood. Youth were also asked about what they were most proud of. Some youth shared academic and employment accomplishments, and many youth shared that they were proud of their strength and resilience, often describing how far they had come in life despite experiencing many challenges. They also shared their goals. Many were also related to education and employment, like graduating high school or applying to post-secondary. Other youth shared financial goals, like saving up money to move into their own apartment. Many youth also shared life skills goals, like getting a driver's license and learning to cook new meals. The study is ongoing, so if you know anyone who is in care in BC who might be interested in participating, please share our email or have them go to our website.
Thanks, Leah. So the we were going to try and show a film, but it's not going to work. So I apologize for that. But we know that the work of the YRA has been hugely valuable to agencies and particularly to the Ministry of Children and Family Development as they've kind of developed new programs for youth transitioning out of care. But we really wanted to see the kind of value for young people who go through the YRA as well. So they do an evaluation that was co-created by the first cohort of the YRA, and it includes self-report surveys when they first join the YRA, at the end of the time, and then 3 to 6 months later. Young people also make a claymation video at the beginning about what they want to get out of it, and one at the end about what they did get out of it. We were hoping to show one today, but we can't get the tech to work. But they are all on our website and on our YouTube channel if you're interested. And the particular picture here is one from cohort 1, where they were really interested in kind of learning and developing, and this is their first video, and they kind of in the final one they've grown and learnt and produced all this amazing work. So they're really quite beautiful, I think to watch. But yeah, so we've done an evaluation of young people, and so the most recent kind of evaluation report that we did was May 2023. And if you are interested, we could send the results for that. But we looked at kind of outcomes across different sort of domains. So knowledge and understanding. So are young people learning about research? Are they learning about kind of important community youth issues and things? And as you can see from the results there, the majority are saying that they've had quite a bit or very much improvement in these kind of areas. We also kind of, what was neat, have had a significant number of young people say that they've learned a lot about Indigenous cultural practices in relation to youth health. We've also asked about employment and education kind of outcomes. The YRA was originally kind of set up to sort of support young people into education and employment. So we don't want to lose sight of that. And definitely 100% of the young people who've participated in the evaluation have seen at least a little improvement in their job readiness. The majority feel that they're going to go back into education, and we definitely don't have anybody by the end of the time in the YRA who are not thinking that they will graduate high school, which is significantly different to what we see when young people have joined the YRA. So a real positive there. And about 2/3 of young people, by the time they finish the YRA, are in school, 47% in post-secondary, and 19% completing high school or equivalent. In terms of sort of social and emotional outcomes, all young people have said they've seen improvements in their connections to other young people because of their involvement in the YRA, also in enhanced connections to community and to community services and programs. And that's often come through being commissioned by those services and programs to do work. So some kind of real positive connections have come from those. Most young people have also felt that they've contributed to their community and feel that they're helping other youth in and from care through the work of the YRA. Also reported a greater desire to be involved in community decision making following their time in the YRA. And for me in particular, it's been really exciting to go to other agencies and see kind of alumni who've gone on to positions with advocacy agencies, with RCY, with the Federation of BC Youth and Care Networks, and in government as well. So, really moving on to use the skills that they've learned. We did a sort of retrospective last year and hunted out the alumni from 2016 and since then that we kind of maybe didn't have as much contact with or who've moved away, just to kind of see if there'd been lasting impacts of the YRA, because the evaluation data stops kind of 6 months after they've graduated. And you can see some of the quotes on the screen there for sort of what young people were saying about the impact that going through the YRA had on them, even, kind of 5 and 6 years later. So I think, you know, like we've sort of seen the impact of the work for other organizations who've commissioned projects. We've seen the impact on the young people, and it's also had a huge impact on our organization. We exist entirely to improve youth health. So having young people involved in this sustainable way, instead of just purely on kind of a project by project kind of basis where young people came and went, but having those ongoing connections has really helped us to keep our research relevant and evolving. It really helps kind of making sure we're getting the key messages right, that they're relatable, and that we're sharing back in a way that's meaningful for young people, as well as for service providers and, you know, adults in schools and all those kind of audiences. They've definitely really helped us beyond the YRA. We've got this hugely talented pool of young people that we can call upon when we need data entry or additional analysis or, you know, help with focus groups and stuff. So it's been hugely beneficial from that sense, and has definitely led to new projects and new youth groups within our organization. So hugely impactful for us. In terms of sort of the impact on other organizations, to sort of summarize kind of what Katie was saying, we've seen new programs implemented. So the SAGE suite of benefits that have come out for young people who've transitioned out of care through the ministry, which now go up to 27 and have extended tuition supports and things like that, have been hugely influenced by the longitudinal study that the YRA have done, and they continue to use that to evaluate how that program's going. We also saw with the bootcamp model, what was going to be a pretty expensive model that everybody was gung-ho to bring to BC, did not actually end up being something that young people wanted. And that, so that, you know, the money's gone into something that's a bit more sort of tailored to the needs of BC. The YRA are often called upon to consult by government, by a range of agencies, but particularly by government. So, for example, last week, we had one of the ministries in talking to the YRA about why youth might not be taking up the sort of legislation and rights-based things that are attached to the new intimate images laws that have come out. You know, how are they not youth-friendly? How do young people not know about them? So we get those kind of consultations all the time. We also see the Trust Collective Impact, which is I think 44 agencies across the lower mainland of British Columbia working together to improve outcomes for youth in care. They use a ton of the YRA's work. They divide into kind of these working groups around housing and employment and education, and each one of those is able to use some additional studies that they commissioned the YRA for, such as there's been some stuff around an employment survey and an education survey, but also the longitudinal study really helps to inform the work of those working groups. And then other people use it, as I was saying, just kind of on an ongoing basis. And then the example that Katie shared from the alcohol, the underage girls' alcohol, that led to about, I think it was about $2.5 million in funding going into very, very upstream approaches to have discussions with girls about alcohol use. So some hugely kind of impactful projects, and then ripple effects from those as well. Another ripple effect that's come from it was the Young Indigenous Research Team, which was formed by alumni of the Youth Research Academy who really wanted to stay involved, but had sufficient skills to work more independently than in the YRA. And they really wanted to focus on Indigenous youth health projects. So I think there's 8 of them originally who formed the Young Indigenous Research Team, and they focus specifically on Indigenous youth health projects. They create, just to go back, actually, they created this is their kind of logo, and it's a take on McCreary's logo, but it includes the traditional medicines and really has that kind of Indigenous ownership to it. They also kind of created this leaf which shows the history of McCreary's engagement with Indigenous communities and the different projects that we've done over the years. And it's been hugely powerful when they're applying for grant applications and things like that to support their work. The project that they're working on right now is Raven's Children 6. So Raven's Children is a report that we put out from the BC Adolescent Health Survey data. We've always had Indigenous researchers who work on that report, but it's traditionally been kind of university, PhD students, professors who've helped to kind of write that report. So this time it's young people, and it's all members of the Young Indigenous Research Team. So they've kind of done every piece of work with some guidance from Indigenous scholars. They ran all the analysis over the summer. They've drafted the report, and we met last week with UVic and Thompson Rivers University professors to go over kind of where they've got. So they're going to do a bit of tweaking to that final report, and then that will go out for community consultation and for dissemination in the fall and winter. So an incredible achievement for those young people. And they did it much quicker than we usually produce it as well. And then just to sort of finish with some of their other examples of work that they've done, there's a real interest around urban Indigenous youth and how best to support them, particularly by school districts who don't have a large Indigenous population. So the example of the fact sheet on the left there is a project they did for Surrey School District, which is the largest school district in British Columbia, who really wanted to know how to better serve Indigenous students in a school district that's largely kind of very, very multicultural, very diverse, lots of immigrants and Indigenous students they felt were getting lost in that picture. So a lot of work there with Surrey School District. And then they've created kind of visuals of different reports and things really focused in on Indigenous youth health. So some real positives, I think, and that group's just going to go from strength to strength. They're also, as part of the Ravens project, doing some work about urban Indigenous youth data sovereignty and looking at how we can better steward that as a society and as we work towards truth and reconciliation. So I'm just going to finish talking in a minute, but I'll just end by sort of talking about lessons learned from the Youth Research Academy and subsequently from the Young Indigenous Research Team. I would say we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. We've created a toolkit and a manual in case people are interested in not repeating the mistakes that we've made. I think when we set it up, we had a lovely kind of Gantt chart of how everything would work, and people, you know, we would do monthly check-ins with people, and we would do all this kind of thing. And of course, you know, when you get into real life, it doesn't really work like that. So we've made it much more kind of open door and proactive. So we meet with young people much more often than once a month. Everybody has a point person. They check in more regularly with that. They check in at the beginning of each kind of shift and make a conscious effort to say hello and check how people are doing before we ever get started. We've messed about with times a bit. You know, a lot of young people are not up early in the morning, so making sure it's a half-day schedule later in the afternoon. Like Katie was saying, you know, cutting half an hour off if people just can't concentrate. It's too much by the end of the day. We've had young people kind of quit at various points and making sure that the door's always open to come back and that young people know that, you know, if they're struggling and they need time out, they can come back. We realized, you know, a lot of young people were turning up hungry, and you can't learn and you can't participate if you're hungry. So trying to make sure we have plenty of healthy food options available to young people before the day starts. Having kind of really clear expectations of what the projects are, what the deadlines are, you know, what we need to do, how we need to work together. And then we haven't always been great at celebrating success, you know, just taking a breath between one project and just really kind of celebrating the work that went into it and what people have achieved and, you know, what you can put on your CV as a result of kind of what you've done and things like that. So we've gotten much better at those kind of things over time, I think. We've also kind of really learned to proactively plan for when things might go wrong. So family holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas can be, really difficult for young people. So we make sure that we're kind of aware of that, and we're doing social opportunities and things. We always have a big party between Christmas and New Year when, all alumni and current members of the YRA can come together if they want to. Just really making sure to kind of be aware of those. Also, for some projects, there are only opportunities for some members, and some young people are going to miss out. And that can be, or maybe their skill level is not where it needs to be for a particular project. And that can be hugely difficult for young people, particularly if you've experienced a lot of kind of missing out, previously in your life. So really making sure to kind of talk through why decisions are made, and what young people might need to do if they do want to go and present but are not kind of at that place yet. And then we found some young people really struggled at the end of the YRA. So we much earlier now start to plan for next steps and ways to stay connected if they want to, and what they might want to do next, and much earlier in the process to kind of ease that transition out. And then we had a quite tumultuous first cohort. So we learned to deal with group conflict before it happens, rather than wait till it's happened and try and kind of pick up the pieces afterwards. So we've had, we work through scenarios, we work through like potential workplace things that get on everybody's nerves and lead to conflict things, and do that kind of conflict resolution early in the groups, just to try and kind of skill everybody up and be aware of those kind of things. There's a ton more lessons learned in the manual and stuff, so I won't go on. But I just kind of wanted to finish by kind of concluding, like from our point of view, it's really helped engaging, young people who've been through the care system in the entire research process, from kind of, right up with kind of designing the projects through to disseminating the results, has made sure that the research that's done in this area is relevant and inclusive and respectful of their needs. Definitely, we've seen from our evaluation, it's supporting young people to build the skills they need to be successful. We're helping to support community inclusion and helping young people to build positive connections, both with other young people, some of our other youth groups, as well as YRA alumni, and then across different agencies, and also kind of having that impact on policies and programs, and showing that you can engage young people in their development and stuff. So I'm just going to finish, I hope, by just showing a little video that the YRA alumni made when they were doing a presentation which they'd been asked to pull together, looking at just like what are the impacts of having young people engaged in research.
My involvement has impacted me positively by creating confidence to pursue education and research that will help my community and those in need.
I think before I was going off my own experience and that of people I know, but now I can speak from a general and more broad perspective with data to back it up.
I enjoyed the process of doing research and turning it into something that other people can interpret and use.
My passion to help youth and former youth in care, and I like the fact that being involved in youth-led research gives me an outlet to do this.
It was helpful learning about what supports actually help and being able to say there is data that shows this is a really good support for youth, so we should be advocating for this.
I am more interested in jobs that have research aspects now, so hopefully this experience will help me with future employment.
It gave me insight into what various youth's experiences are and more experience in knowing what youth in government care are facing.
I learned how to stand my ground as a youth and as someone with lived experience. It taught me how to have a voice.
Oh, sorry, Annie, I think you're muted.
Probably not for the last 20 minutes. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's it. Katie or Leah, anything to add before we throw it open to questions?
Yeah, I would love to add one thing. I think one of the things that McCreary has done so well is the team that works with the Youth Research Academy is incredible. And I feel like that can make such a difference. I know they have had a big impact in my life. And like I touched a little bit on the impacts supportive adults can have for youth. And I have certainly found that to be true and just very grateful for you guys.
Thank you, Leah. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much to Annie, Katie, and Leah for providing this excellent in-depth overview of the Youth Research Academy. We certainly learned a lot from this model out in here in BC. And we do have a few questions from the audience to go over, all centered around the YRA. So the first question is, I'm struck by how the YRA operates and is available for specific contracts initiated by the other organizations outside of the McCreary Center. And so this question is asking, how do members of the YRA orient themselves around diverse contracts? What's their specific role in negotiating the contracts and the scope of work? Or is that work of negotiation done by the McCreary Center? What's the youth involvement with actually like being part of the contract building work?
I can start on that one. It's really varied depending kind of on the contract. So some, I'd be honest, they have had zero involvement in kind of the thing. The ministry or somebody has come and said, we've got some money, it's the end of the year, will you take it and do a project? And we've just said yes, you know, because we are reliant on, we're a not-for-profit, so we take those contracts. So sometimes it's been done that way. So the Raven's Children report, the Young Indigenous Research Team wrote the entire grant, did everything from beginning to end, got the funding and dealt with, you know, and we've had some challenges with it in terms of kind of so the people who wrote the grant are not authorized signatures on the bank account or something like we've really had to work through those things where funders have a specific kind of format that they want things to follow, and it doesn't always follow that when it's young people who are doing all the work on those kind of things. So I would say it's run all the gamut from zero involvement, and we've just said, hey, we've got this project, what do you think, all the way through to they've written it, they've negotiated it, they've been interviewed by the funders.
Good. Okay.
Sorry, just to add in too, I think I was just thinking of an example too of a project that the RCY had wanted to do around transition planning specifically, and they had come, and it was sort of like we had sort of agreed to do this project, and they came and were sort of visiting with the YRA and talking about the project, and realized that it was just the way that the approach that they were going to take was not I don't know what the word is, not the best, I guess. For the youth.
Trauma-informed.
Yes, it wasn't very trauma-informed. I was trying to be a little bit polite, but it wasn't very trauma-informed, and had a real impact on the YIRT. And then as a result, we were able to sort of say, okay, maybe we just take a step back, and this project they need to think about how they're doing this before. So some of that has happened a little bit as well, in terms of the contracts and projects.
Excellent. And how many projects is the YRA roughly engaged in annually?
Again, it really depends. Like every cohort works on the youth transitioning out of care study that Leah shared, and what they do on top of that really varies on kind of whether it's a huge contract that we've got that's going to take the entire 10 months, or it's small kind of little projects. So it can really vary. I think we had one cohort who probably did like 10 or 12 different quite small pieces of work, and different pieces, and then we've had others who've just worked on one big thing.
Yeah. For that study that you mentioned, are there successive cohorts of the YRA involved for the longitudinal study? And are there members that continue from cohort to cohort? And is there a leadership structure in place within the YRA for longer studies like that?
There's a mentorship structure, I would say, rather than a leadership kind of structure. So we don't have an Indigenous peer mentor for this current cohort. They're all tied up with the Young Indigenous Research Team. So pros and cons for those kind of things. But so the first cohort were involved in kind of setting it up, and then a mentor from the first cohort was involved with the second cohort, and then one from the second cohort involved with the third cohort. So it kind of like moves along that way, but for the most part it's a different group of young people working on it each year.
But we've also had, like with our funding for the initial funding for the YRA, we had more restrictions on we had to have kind of different youth each time. But as the YRA has become more self-sustaining, we've been able to loosen that a little bit. And so we have had repeat youth. So some youth have been in more than one cohort just as participants. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, so it's great to have that mentorship structure in place so that like knowledge isn't lost either through cohort to cohort, and like the skills are continued. So yeah, that's a fantastic model. And then what kind of training do YRA members receive for such high levels of research output?
You want to take that one, Leah, or do you want me to?
Go for it. I'll jump in if I have anything to add.
Okay, so that's good. I mean, we do kind of for sure the sort of office skills, working together skills, those kind of soft skills, that's kind of part of it. In terms of the research, we use SPSS a lot. So we have community-based researchers who are really, really good at, I think, at kind of explaining it and, teaching people to use SPSS. So for example, the youth transitioning out of care study, they've just all learned SPSS and produced that report. They're now going on to do some analysis of the BC Adolescent Health Survey. That requires SPSS complex samples. So we have somebody else who's teaching that, and it's those researchers work with the YRA all the way through the process and build skills. So start with doing frequencies, then do crosstabs, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Excellent. And for those who might be unfamiliar, could you explain what SPSS is? I understand it's a type of software.
It's a statistical software that's used a lot in the social sciences.
Yeah, and I would love to add that because it is community-based research, the language is very youth-friendly. So if you read the reports, it's like easy to understand, and easy to learn, which is helpful.
Yeah, that's accessible language is so important for anything community-based. So that's great to hear. And then I did have one more question around. So the sorry, I had the question in my head while you were answering the training question. What kind of sorry, you were speaking about how the researchers from SP train them to use SPSS. So my question was around like the older cohorts. Do you have success stories of older cohorts that have graduated out of this program who were successfully able to find jobs within fields that they like as a result of this program?
We do, yeah. And we've got somebody who just connected with a couple of weeks ago, who went to work for the local government doing data entry, and has moved up kind of through the ranks, and is now doing kind of like is not in that entry level position, which was huge for her in her situation, but like didn't necessarily come wanting to do research in the first place, but really got an interest and has now gone on. And we've got people in various different roles where it's come in useful. We had somebody who went off into accounting, but actually the kind of stats and stuff had been really helpful in that kind of trajectory. So it's not always the traditional path that you might think it would lead to, but
yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's training youth to develop those soft skills and hard skills for any type of career that they might be interested in pursuing. And then my last question is, are members of the YRA, are they all volunteers, or do they do they receive any type of honorariums or compensations for the research work that they do for the community?
it's a paid position. Sorry, Katie, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. No, yeah, it is a paid position. So they are hired on as employees, and so they're paid an hourly rate and accrue sick time and vacation time, and all of those things. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, this is a fantastic project. Thank you so much, Annie, Katie, and Leah, for coming on and educating us about the Youth Research Academy. It's a fantastic model for engaging youth in the aging out of care process, and we're very thankful for you spending your time here with us to let us know about the YRA. And so we are at the end of our time now here today. So thank you to the CanTrack team, and especially to Annie, Katie, and Leah for presenting this webinar. Again, for our audience, the recording of this webinar will be available in 24 hours, or you can use the link in your email. And feel free to send us your questions, suggestions for improvement, or feedback using the survey that will appear at the end of the session as well. Another huge thank you to our guests and our audience for your time and attention. We will see you next time. Have a great day.